This story still haunts me to this day. This takes place around 10 years ago when I was like 8 or 9. I lived in a pretty bad neighborhood in what was at the time a really rundown city. It wasn't good, but it wasn't bad at the same time. Just a few bad apples in the tree. Anyways, enough background on the neighborhood, now on to the main story. My friends and I loved to play outside. It was really the only thing that we could do. No one in the neighborhood could afford any sort of electronics or any sort of fun machine to play with. We loved to just run through people's yards, cutting through houses, if they just so happened to leave their door open. Now looking back at it, it's probably the dumbest thing kids our age could have been doing in a neighborhood like that. This story has nothing to do with running in people's houses. I just wanted to let you know how dumb of kids we were. Well, on one fateful day, we were playing hide and seek with 4 of us hiders and 1 of us being a seeker. We thought that it would have been a funny idea to go to the other side of the neighborhood, so that the seeker could never find us and we would win. We like to call that part of the neighborhood the rich part, because they had 2-story houses over there and a forest with a creek in it. We were just doing our usual thing, cutting through people's yards and jumping fences, when we heard the loudest scream maybe 4 to 5 houses down. After hopping off the fence that we had just jumped, we all stopped and looked around wondering where it came from. I noticed that one of our hiders weren't with us anymore. 3 of us left. "Where's Isaac?" I exclaimed. We heard the scream again. I pointed towards where the sound came from, and we all jumped back over the fence that we had just jumped from, and ran towards the scream. When we thought we got to the spot where the screaming was coming from, there was nothing there but an empty plot of land in the forest. We all started to get scared. Did Isaac get lost in the forest? Did he get taken back there? And then we heard the scream again. It was definitely Isaac. I decided to be the man of all the other 8-year-olds and go into the forest to make sure that Isaac was okay. As I started my way into the trees, I did one last look at my friends and saw how horrified their faces were. I knew at the moment that I was definitely the only one that could go down into the forest. Making my way in, I could feel all the heat in my body fading, and some sort of dread starting to take over. As I walked further in, it started getting darker and harder to see. I was whisper yelling my friend's name. He responded in the most shaken up voice. "Down here, be quiet." I finally got to him and asked him what had happened. He told me the story of how he got tired of running and decided to take a break on the curb to catch his breath. And then instead of being out in the open and risking the chance of being caught, he decided to go into the woods and hide. He said that after like 5 minutes, after he had sat down, he heard talking. Nothing that he could make out though, just random nonsense. He looked around to see a man in a black hoodie hiding behind a tree on the other side of the creek, staring at him. But the man took off before my friend could even get up to run away. And this is where he said he started screaming at the top of his lungs, and he hid somewhere else in the forest, which is where both of us are now hiding. And I kid you not, as soon as he told me this, we heard a twig snap. We both look up and see the man looking for us in some of the shrubbery of the forest floor. I couldn't make out any facial expressions or anything on his face, for a matter of fact, but I could see that he was holding some sort of blade. I couldn't tell if it was a stick or a machete. All I knew is that we needed to run. So when he turned his back, we got up and started running. We didn't care how loud we were. We just knew that we needed to run. We got out of the forest and told all of our friends to run as fast as they could back down the street. We kept running until we got to the other side of the block, and we all turned around to see that the street was empty. No one, not a single car. And from a distance you could hear a roar, or like a very loud engine. Shortly after that initial roar, a silver 2000 Mustang with the darkest windows came peeling around the corner faster than I'd ever seen a car go, and it was heading straight towards us. I've never had my body tighten up like it had at that very moment. when I knew that it was the same guy from the forest. I told all my friends to split up and run into people's yards to hide. So, as we were all hiding and running through alleyways and jumping fences, you could still hear his engine. It was like he was targeting only me. I can't even tell you how far I ran. I got to the point where I didn't even think I was in my neighborhood, but still, I could hear his engine coming up on me. So I ran more and I was exhausted. The sun finally started to set and I could hear his engine fade, almost like he had forgotten about me or just given up. I started making my way back home, scared out of my mind, checking my back every so often to make sure that I wasn't being followed. Once I made it home, I went right to bed to cry myself to sleep. And for months after that, the 2000 silver Mustang would follow us, stalking every corner that we played on. We would see it at our school, at the grocery store. Heck, it could have been a coincidence that our little minds are not perceiving things around us. But either way, I think he was stalking us. Nothing actually came out of him following us. He never did what he did that first day. But it was still so scary seeing that car everywhere we went. I didn't know what to or how to tell my mom, so I didn't, and I still haven't to this day. Funny enough, too, the seeker didn't know what had happened until the day after, when we were all at school and we had told him. He still doesn't believe us, and he really thinks that we were just messing with him and trying to make him look for us all night. Luckily, I haven't seen that man around in a while, and I hope I never do again. This was back in 2015 when I was 16 years old. I'm a guy, by the way. It was in the summer where both my parents went to visit some relatives out of town then, and they would not be home for about 3 days. I was the only child and I was the only one left in the house. My grandma did visit me about every single day to make me lunch. They didn't ask her to do that, but she had insisted. But of course, she didn't stay during the night. And that's when I went wild. Watching movies, gaming, watching YouTube. Everything that you could picture a 16-year-old doing when his parents aren't home. So the second night, I was watching a movie and I ran out of chips and I paused the movie and went down in the kitchen to grab some more. But then I heard a window break and a door opening. The kitchen was separate from the living room where the door was open. I grabbed a knife and I slowly peeked my head around. And there he was, a tall man around 6 foot. He had a baseball cap, an old jacket, and probably leather, but it was torn on the right sleeve. My phone was in my room upstairs. From the kitchen door, the stairs were directly to its right, so in my dumb mind, I was thinking that I could sneak past him and lock myself in. He was going through the shelf next to the door, very loudly I must say. And so I got to the stairs somehow and he turned around and realized that I was there. Out of fear, I guess, I screamed and threw the knife at him. I missed him, but it hit the wall beside his head, sticking the knife in there. My guess that he got scared by me and my savage screaming and the throw, and he ran out before I could grab another knife. Yeah, I ran back and got another one. Adrenaline is one hell of a drug. When I saw that he left, I ran to my room and called the police. They came quickly and just took fingerprints and any DNA samples that they could find. Next morning, I called my parents and they came back around noon. I don't know why, but I kept the knife lodged in the wall next to the door. So the first question asked is, why is there a knife in the wall? And we changed the front door with a more heavy-duty lock and they arrested the guy within the same week. One of the cops told me that the guy was thinking that I was going to kill him and tried to call the police on me for attempted murder. It's kind of funny. So, I guess the moral of the story is hide when someone's robbing your house or learn how to act like a maniac. Before I start, I have to explain something. I lived 2 years ago in a house that had a terrace and a small parking lot 1 meter below this terrace. My room was upstairs and there was a door to the stairs that could be locked. I live in the south of France in the Pont-Royal area. Everything was going well. I lived with my former father-in-law and my mother. I was playing Minecraft in my room. For no reason, I look to the left towards my window and I see a man standing there in a balaclava staring at my window. I see an object in his hand, but I don't pay attention. I get stressed and I go to warn my mother and my stepfather. I'm totally panicked. They lock all the doors and it takes me a while to sleep and to forget about it. Weeks go by and 2 months after this stressful moment, the same situation this time. I was playing Among Us, but I had changed my habits. I was always looking at the window if this guy was there, and I was always closing the door. So I see this guy again. Although I'm stressed, this time I'm really scared because I'm home alone. I leave for 10 seconds and suddenly I don't see him anymore. I tell myself that he's gone, but no. I hear a big noise at the front door, so I deduce that it had been forced. I totally stress. I take my phone, my keys, and my laptop in a bag, and I think about the situation, but I open the window and I go down on my terrace. I go down to the parking lot and I hear at this moment another noise coming from my house, and then a third one, and I see the same guy, and I distinguish the same object, which was a knife. I then start to run until I reach the house of a friend, and I'm totally exhausted by my sprint, and fortunately he lets me in. I tell him with difficulty what had happened to me. In the meantime, I call my mother and the security of the domain, and shortly after, I see these same car make several turns in the domain and pass 4 times in front of my friend's house. And at the second passage of this one, I recognize the man who was there a few moments earlier in the passenger seat. And I see not only one person before. 2 years after having lived that, I obviously moved in a bigger city, but moreover, in an apartment in a quiet district, and my boyfriend often comes to see me. This story was a very long time ago, and a lot of it I struggle to remember, so I had to get a lot of the details from my mom beforehand. So, I'm a guy, and about 11 years ago when I was only 8, my family and I, my mom, dad, and brother, as well as my brother's girlfriend, who was living with us at the time, went on a holiday to Australia to visit some relatives on my mom's side of the family. They lived in the rural parts of Victoria, and to give a basic summary of the area, they lived on a farm. The house was surrounded by various fields, and when facing the house on the left side, there were 2 fields, and then at the far end of these fields there was a highly wooded area with a dirt track running through it. My grandparents, the relatives that lived there, would often go on nature rambles through the forest to spot the wildlife that lived within there. My mother, being a dedicated bird spotter, decides to head off with me and Lisa, my brother's girlfriend, into the forest as we both had a fascination with wildlife. We must have been walking along the dirt track for around 10 minutes, taking pictures of the various animals that we had seen. We passed by a lot of motorbikes and around 7 bikers having a barbecue. One of the bikers politely smiled at my mother and she responded with a simple, "Good evening." As we walked past them, one of the bikers approached us and asked where we were going. We told them and they informed us that they had been camping in this area for around 2 nights. They told us to be careful as people had been shooting game out in the forest. These people apparently had aggressive dogs, so we were told to be careful. Around 15 minutes later, I had spotted an old barn which I dashed off to explore, being the adventurous child that I was, while my mother and Lisa observed a bird of some kind. I didn't tell them where I was going. As I approached the barn, I saw 3 large dogs tied up outside. They were Rottweilers and they seemed incredibly aggressive. They were on chains and barking and snarling a lot. I didn't think anything of it at the time. I assumed they were for hunting, but looking back, Rottweilers aren't hunting dogs. There was also an old mattress on the floor outside which appeared to be covered in brown stains, and it emanated a foul aroma. I was around 3 feet away from the mattress, but the smell was unbelievably powerful. As I was going to turn around to return to the others, I saw a man emerging from the barn. The image of this man is one of the few things I remember clearly from this day. He was very tall, about 6'4", and was wearing a blue pinstripe suit. The strangest thing about him was that he was wearing a large top hat. His clothes seemed very worn in his face. The parts of it that weren't covered by a large brown beard were red, as if he had been working in the hot day all along. I remember the man smiled and approached me. I asked him if he was a magician, to which he said, "No, I look after doggies. Do you like doggies?" I told him that I did. This is when things started getting weird. He began to approach me and asked if I wanted to come inside and have my picture taken with the dogs. I politely refused and said that my mom would be looking for me. He grabbed my hand lightly and said that it would only take a second. At that point, my mom began walking even faster, to the point that she was dragging me along. The next part of the story is mostly a blur to me. I remember my mom gasping, picking me up and sprinting full pelt with me while screaming for help. My mom tells me that the man had begun running towards us and had managed to grab my leg. She said that Lisa jumped on the man's back and scratched all across his face before he threw her on the floor. My mom apparently kicked the man in the testicles, grabbed Lisa off the ground and ran with me over her shoulder. I remember that we slowed down shortly afterwards and stopped to catch our breath. We continued waiting for the magician to show back up again from the brush area. My mom began to panic and started running with me again. The man was sprinting after us. We were nearing the area where the bikers were camping, and my mom screamed out for help. Two bikers emerged from the trees nearby, and my mom screamed, "That man tried to kidnap my son." The man turned around and immediately bolted in the other direction. One of the bikers pursued him, but unfortunately, the magician had a head start on him. I remember the bikers were incredibly nice, and I soon forgot about the strange man after one of the bikers let me sit up front on his motorbike, while my mom and Lisa went in the sidecar. The guy took us into the nearest town and dropped us off at the police station where my mom had filed a report. After that, he gave us all a lift back home, which was also really nice. I never got to thank him at the time, as I didn't really understand the situation. But on the off chance that you're a reader of this, I want to say thank you. As for you, magician, whose intentions for me I'm unsure of, I do not want to thank you. I used to work at a small neighborhood gas station. I was working an opening shift at 6 a.m. with my best friend and coworker. And we were doing our normal opening stuff, and as the sun came up, I went to get some ice from the back. For reference, the gas station building used to have a drive-thru, so we have that kind of window in the back. I glanced at that back window and realized that there was literally a bloody handprint in the back window. I looked closer and there were smudges of blood around the window handle that looked like someone was definitely attempting to slide it open. We were really freaked out, so we went to look around other potential entrances around the building. I looked at the window in front and noticed dried blood in the hole where we'd take money for gas from outside, like someone was trying to stick their hand in to get to something inside. I kept looking around and there was also dried blood on the front door handles, plus some splatters in the glass like someone had been pounding on it. My friend and I were both freaking out at this point. Luckily though, I had access to these security cameras and I checked them for any motion detected during the night. At 5 a.m., there was a motion capture and we watched as a man with his arms covered in blood walked around the store trying to get in. The freakiest thing was usually the store is opened at 5 a.m., but it happened to be Sunday, so we opened at 6. Really dodged a bullet there. There were police lights in the distance on the camera, so we called the sheriff. He showed up pretty quick, watched the security footage and confirmed it was the guy that they had picked up just a bit after 5:30. Definitely the craziest thing that's happened to me in my 3.5 years of working at gas stations.